Hey, Algebra 1, I'm going to do the Braille School for Unit 9. Okay, just remember, I'm going to go through the review from that we went over before the test last time. The first page, again, is just the factoring and completing square and quadratic formula. The last two pages are the ones where you have to come up with your own method, or choose which method to use. Okay, now remember, when you go through these, in the Edpuzzle, I'm going to stop, and you'll have to answer a question. That question, you need to both number it, the same number that's in the Edpuzzle, and put it on a separate sheet of paper and keep it all in one place. When you are done with the Edpuzzle, that's when you're going to come and check in with me to review. Okay? Only when you are done with that Edpuzzle, then we will review. Okay? So you got to finish all the questions. Again, you can skip through this. You don't have to watch the entire Edpuzzles, but you must complete all the questions. Use this Edpuzzle as a way to help you finish those questions. Okay? Okay, so let's start with the first one. First one says we're going to factor this problem here. 2x squared plus 4x minus 4 equals 12. Okay, well remember, when we factor, we want everything to equal 0. Everything must equal 0. And right now it equals 12. So that means we need to get rid of this 12. Okay? So what we do is subtract 12. Or subtract the number on the right side. Because it's a positive 12, I need to subtract. That goes away. And then I end up with 2x squared plus 4x, and negative 4 minus 12 is negative 16. Sorry, that's 4x. Now it equals 0. Okay, so now we can start working on factoring this. But what I see now is that here at 2 and at 4 and 16, I can divide all of those by 2. So what I'll do is divide them by 2 to make this problem easier for me. Okay, so that will go away. And now I have x squared plus 4x divided by 2 is 2x. Then negative 16 divided by 2 is negative 8. And 0 divided by 2 is 0. Okay, so now I can just go ahead and try my x. Now again, if the first number is not bigger than 1, if it's just 1, all I have to do is the x. I don't have to do the box. So now I'll just set up my x. And remember, the number on the top is the first number, 1, times the last, negative 8, so that's negative 8, over the middle number, which is 2. So now I need to figure out two numbers that will multiply to negative 8, but then add to 2. Well, I know 4 and 2 multiply to 8, and one of them has to be negative. So the 2 has to be negative because 4 minus 2 is positive 2. Or, remember, the bigger number has to be positive. This is positive, so the bigger number has to be positive, 4. Now I can write my factors. And again, if this number is just 1, I don't have to do the x box. I can just write positive 4, so it's x plus 4, and negative 2, so it's x minus 2. And then remember, x is a liar. So if this is positive 4, my answer is negative 4. If this is negative 2, my answer is positive 2. Okay? Another way you can do this too is if you pull this out, x minus 2, and you make it equal 0, then I can solve that and figure out what this answer is. And I'll get the same thing. This is negative 2, so let's add it. Add to both sides. And now those 2's cancel out, and I have x equals 2. And that's where this 2 comes from. And if I do the same thing with x plus 4 over here, I'll get that negative 4 the same way. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Now the thing is, on this first page, when you go through all these problems, you should end up with the same answer. You're working on the same problem. You're only doing it 3 different ways. Okay, so make sure you make note of that. Okay, so now we're going to complete the square. Okay, the first thing you need to do with completing the square is you don't make it equal 0. You actually want all the numbers on the right side. Okay, so when you do factoring, you want it to equal 0. When you do quadratic formula, you want it to equal 0. But when you do it completing the square, you want everything to equal the numbers. Okay, so, or the last number. Okay, so now in this case, I have negative 4 here, and I want that on the right side. So I'm going to add 4 because it's negative 4. So we do it to both sides. Now we have 2x plus 4x equals 16. And again, I'm going to divide by 2, just like I did before, but not only is this going to make it easier to work with, completing the square, you have to have 1 as the first number, okay? So I can't have a 2 next to this x squared. It has to go away. And if you can't make it go away, then you've got to use a different method, okay? But in this case, I can. So I can divide everything by 2. Now those 2's go away. Now I have x squared plus 4, not 4, plus 4x divided by 2, which is 2x, equals 16 divided by 2, which is 8. Now if you notice, I left space right here, and that's important for completing the square. So now, once you've done that, once you have the numbers on the right, now you make your box. And inside that box, first you're going to put x squared, the first number. And then the next thing you want to put in there is you look at the middle number, which is 2x in this case, and you take half of that, and half goes in this box and half goes here. So half of 2x is 1x. So I'll put 1/2 there and another half there. Now usually we fill in this last box with the last number, but we don't have a last number, okay? Because we moved it. So now what we need to do is figure out the outside, and then we can find the last number. Okay, so now I know to get x squared, I would have to multiply x times x. Okay, and with completing the square, it's always going to be x and x. Okay? Then x times what equals 1x? Well, that's just 1. And then you notice it's the same number here, so it'll also be 1 here. And then to complete that last number that goes in that box right there, well then you do the outside number times the other outside number, 1 times 1, so 1 goes there. That same 1, you have to add it to both sides. Okay? Now, what you do is you factor x squared plus 2x plus 1. And the good thing is I don't have to do the x. I don't have to do a box to figure that out, because it's already factored here. Okay? And that's what that is. That's why we do the box, is so we can find that. So the factor is going to be x plus 1, because that 1 is positive, squared. And the reason it's squared, again, is because I have x plus 1 here and another x plus 1 here, so I have 2 of them, so I square it. And then go ahead and add the right side. It's 9. Now you're in that stage where I've got parentheses squared and equals a number. So I can take the square root of both sides. So now you take the square root of this. What happens is the parentheses go away. Now you have x plus 1 equals square root of 9 is 3. And remember, when you square root a number, don't forget plus and minus. And then one of the last steps you need to do is you're going to subtract, in this case, 1, because this is positive, because we want x by itself, remember, and we'll subtract it from both sides. Now, x equals, you have 2 answers here. Your first answer is going to be positive 3 minus 1, which is 2. And then the next answer will be negative 3 minus 1. That's negative 4. And then make sure those answers match up with the first problem. And they do, negative 4 and 2. So we're good to go. Okay, so now, oh yeah, and again, there is a shortcut to this, where you don't even have to do the box. What you could do is once you get to this point, where you have x squared, and then the number with an x here, and 8 over here, I know that half of 2x, or half of this number 2, is 1. That 1 will go here. Okay, so let's do a little arrow. So that 1 can go here. Half of 2 is 1. And it's plus 1, because 2 was positive. Then, what you do is you square this number. So 1 squared is equal to this 1. And that's how you add the 1 here. Okay? So you would square this one, and then you would add it to the right side. And that's how to get 9. Okay? And then you wouldn't have to do the box. Okay, so now quadratic formula. Okay, the big key thing here is remembering the formula. Okay? But before you do that, or before we even plug in anything, we need to set up the equation correctly. Now remember, like I said, if you're doing a quadratic formula, it needs to equal 0. So just like in the first problem, subtract 12 so that we can make 0 on the right. Now I have 2x squared plus 4x, and then negative 4 minus 12 is negative 16. And that equals 0. Now what we need to do before we plug in anything is identify what is A, what is B, and what is C. Okay? Now again, I recognize that all these numbers I can divide by 2. So I'm going to do that again, just to make this problem a little easier to work with. And you don't have to with quadratic formula or factoring, but it helps. Okay? The smaller the numbers are, the easier it is to do. So now it would be x squared plus, so now you're going to do 4x divided by 2, it's 2x, and then negative 16 divided by 2 is negative 8, equals 0 divided by 2, which is 0. And now we need to find a, b, and c. So the first number here is 1, and that is our a, the first number. The second number is 2, that's our b. And then the third number, negative 8, is our c. Okay, now let's write out the formula. Okay, so we know it's going to be negative 1 times our b plus and minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. And this is going to equal our x. Okay, so let's plug them in. So negative 1 times our b, which is 2, plus and minus the square root of b squared, so that same 2 squared, minus 4, remember that number is always 4, it doesn't change, times a, which is 1, and then times c, which is negative 8. Okay? And then all of that is going to be over 2 times a, which is 1. Okay? So again, our 1, we plug it in once here for a, sorry, down here, and then our b, which is 2, we plug it in here and here, so again we plugged it in there and there, and then our c, our negative 8, we plugged it in here and here. Okay? Oh yeah, and I forgot the a, we also plug in one more time on the bottom. Okay? For right there. Okay? Okay, so b we plug in twice, a we plug in twice, and c you only plug in once. Okay, so now let's evaluate all this. So negative 1 times 2 is negative 2, plus and minus. Now 2 squared, that's 4. And now multiply all these. Negative 4 times 1 is just negative 4. Then times negative 8 gives us positive 32. Then 2 times 1 is 2. Now, let's bring this up here. Negative 1 plus and minus, and then 4 plus 32 is 36, all over 2. And then let's take the square root of 36, which is just 6. And now, our first answer will be negative 2 plus 6, which would be 4 over 2. And then the second answer will be negative 2 minus 6, which is negative 8 over 2. And so simplify those fractions, and 4 over 2 is 2, and negative 8 over 2 is negative 4. Same answer like we just had before. Okay? Okay, so it was 2 and negative 4 all the way through. Okay, so now let's go to the next page. Okay, now here is where you have to work through your steps. The first page is I tell you do factoring. Then I tell you to complete the square. Then I tell you to do quadratic formula. But here you're going to have to figure out on your own which one do I use. And so I kind of created this little table you can use to follow. And so you always want to start with factoring, which includes x, xbox, and GCF. Then you want to go to complete the square. And then the last thing you want to try is quadratic formula, just because it's usually the most steps involved. Okay? So on this first one, let's see. we could do X, we could do GCF, or Xbox. Well, I know I cannot do X because the first number is bigger than 1. Okay, so I would have to do either Xbox or GCF. In this case, I would prefer GCF. So down here, I'm going to write GCF. Okay, so now, to do GCF, first I look at the numbers, 5 and 25. What's the biggest number you can divide there? It'd be 5. Okay, now how many x's do they share in common? Or they're the same? 5x. Or sorry, 1x. Okay, so now let's write out our factor inside the parenthesis. So now I took away a 5 from 5, so now there's nothing left but just 1. I took away 1x from 2 x's, so now I have 1x. Then we write the plus. Then I took away 5 from this 25, so we divide it. 25 divided by 5 is 5. And I took away 1x, and we started with 1x, so no x's go here. Okay, so then let's simplify this a little more. We don't need that 1, just to make it a little clearer. Okay, now, I know that if I plug in 0 here, that it'll make all of this equal 0, and that's what I want. Because 0 times 5 is 0, and then 0 times anything is just 0. And then here, I can use my x as a liar tip or hint, and if this is positive 5, then my answer should be negative 5. Okay? Okay, and that's the easy way to do with GCF. Okay, if I was to do this with the Xbox, I would first need to rewrite this as 5x squared plus 25x, and then the missing number is the last number, 0. And then I do my x, and then the top number is the first times the last, and it's 5 times 0, so it's just 0. And the bottom would be 25. I'd figure out what those two numbers are, and then I would have to do the box. Okay, so I'm not going to go into details on how to do that. If you want to know, we can go over that when you do a review with me. Okay, so now, and again, I'm just giving you the best choices in these scenarios, okay? There's more than one way to do this. I can do quadratic formula for every single problem, but I'm showing you the ways that are the easiest and the fastest for these particular problems. Okay, so now I notice that the first number in front of the x is 1. And I've got 3 terms. So that means I can do my x. So remember, it's the first times the last, so 9 on the top, and then the middle number on the bottom. And then the two numbers, let's see, would be 3 and 3. Okay, and since the number in the front is 1, I don't have to do the box. I can go straight to my factors. And this is plus positive 3, so it'll be x plus 3. And this is also positive 3, so I'll have another plus 3. Okay, so now I notice that both the factors are the same, so that means they're going to have the same answer. Okay, so that means if this is positive 3, my answer would be negative 3, and this would also be negative 3. But again, they're the same. I don't need 2 answers, so make it just 1. Okay, and what I did right there was factoring. So I just write factoring with x. Okay, so now number 6. Now number 6, I've got 2 numbers with a minus in the middle. And the second number does not have x. So look at the difference between that one and the first one we looked at on this page. This one, the second number has x. So because they share an x, I could do the GCF. But here, I cannot do GCF because this does not have an x. So then my options are, well, I can do the x, an Xbox. Well, I'd have to do the Xbox because remember the first number is bigger than 1. Or let's try the shortcut, which we didn't really mention in our list, but it's something you learned in class. Shortcut is if I have 2 numbers and there's a minus in the middle of them, I can square root the first, square root the last, and then write out my factors. And the first number in each of these factors is going to be the square root of the first number. So that's 2x. Square root of 4x squared is 2x. So that goes here and here.
Then the second number in each will be the square root of the second. 7, which is 7. That goes here and here. And then the signs, remember, are going to be plus and then minus. Okay? Now you might think, oh, they're going to be the same answer because I see the same numbers. But you remember, I've got two different signs. They won't be the same. So now, what you do is take this off to the side, and you set it equal to 0. And the reason I'm doing that and not using the x as a liar trick is because this number in front of x is bigger than 1. All the other cases where I did x as a liar, like here and here, that first number didn't have a 1. Okay? So I pull this out and make it equal 0, and you can do that on any of the problems. And then I subtract 7 here, because it's positive, and then it becomes 2x equals negative 7. And I'm going to divide both sides by 2. And that's my first answer, negative 7 over 2. And I'll do the same thing. Oops, let's bring this down. Same thing with the other side. 2x minus 7 equals 0. And this time I'm going to add 7 because that's negative. Both sides. And then 2x equals positive 7. And then I'll divide both sides by 2. And there's my next answer. X equals 7 over 2, positive 7 over 2. So now I write both my answers together as 1. X equals negative 7 over 2 and 7 over 2. And the method I use there is factoring with shortcut. Okay, now number 7. Okay, now number 7, again, we want to try to factor this first. So let's make it equal 0. Because if you notice, all the other problems had it equal 0. This is equal to 0, this is equal to 0, and this is equal to 0, and this is equal to 0. So we want to try to first make it equal to 0. And in order to do that, that means we need to subtract 1 from this side. Because it's positive, so we subtract it. So now 2x squared plus x minus 1 equals 0. And notice how I didn't, this is 1x, right? I didn't do 1x minus 1 because they're two different kinds of numbers. This number has an x. This number does not have x. So I cannot add or subtract them. Okay, so I just have to keep them separate. Now let's try our x. Remember, the first number times the last number, 2 times negative 1, goes on top. And the middle number is 1. So now, let's see. Well, the only numbers that multiply to 2 are 2 and 1. And I needed to get this to be positive 1, and this needs to multiply to negative, so one of them has to be negative. So this is positive, so that means the bigger one has to be positive, so negative 1. And remember, the first number is bigger than 1, so I have to do the box. Do my box. First number goes up here on the top left. Last number goes here on the bottom right. And then remember, you're going to take your factors, or your numbers that you came up with, and they go in the boxes here and here. Okay, so now 2, and then put an x next to it, and then negative 1, and put an x next to that. Now for the first part, I need two numbers that multiply to 2x squared. Okay, well I know that x times 2x equals 2x squared. Question is, where do I put the 2? Well, does it go on the side here or on the top? Well, let's see. If I put it here, then when I multiply 2x times whatever this number is, I'd have to equal negative 1x. Well, the only number that I can multiply times 2x would be 1/2. And I don't want fractions. So that means I don't want the 2 there. I want the 2x up here. Because now 2x times 1 does equal 2x, and that works. And then x times negative 1 will give us negative 1x. And there is our factors that we need. Right there and right there. Okay, so now, write my factors, parentheses. And the first one will be 2x minus 1, that comes from the top. And then from the side, x plus 1. Oops, sorry about that. zoom in a little more. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this off to the side. And 2x minus 1 equals 0. Add the 1. And then 2x equals 1 and divide by 2. And then the first answer is 1/2. And I know this doesn't have a number bigger than 1 in front of this x, so I can just do x as a liar there. So the first answer was 1/2, and the next answer would be, well, this is positive, so our answer is -1. Okay. Now a trick with these fractions, when you get a answer as a fraction, is that if you look, the fraction has both of these numbers in it. And remember, x is a liar, so if this answer is negative, this one's going to be positive, so that's positive. And then the second number goes on top, and the first number goes on the bottom, so 1/2. Same thing works over here. The answers were 7/2. Well, the second number is 7, that's what goes on top, and the first number is 2, that's what goes on the bottom. And this is plus, so this is minus, this is minus, so this is plus, or negative and positive. Okay? Okay, now let's go down here to number 8. Okay, now at number 8, oops, didn't mean to put that there. Okay, so now again, you want to try to factor. And let's see. Well, remember, it's the first number times the last number. So put 43 on the top, and the middle number goes on the bottom. And let's see, what numbers multiply to 43? We have a problem here. The only numbers that multiply to 43 are 43 and 1, nothing else. So this is not going to work. So we have to try something else. Can't factor it, so remember the next step. If we can't factor, then we need to try to complete the square. Okay? So our goal is to get it to look like this. That way, when we get it to that point, we can just square root both sides. Okay? Okay, so now let's go through the steps on how to get there. Okay, so first, remember when we complete the square, we want all the numbers on the right, the numbers that don't have x. So this number doesn't, so let's subtract that 43 from both sides. And then we get x squared plus 16x equals -43. And remember, I leave room right here, because I'm going to have to plug in a number. And then remember, once you get there, then you can just draw your box. And I think I'll just erase all this. It's wasted space. Just draw the box. So then we'll put the x squared, goes up here. And then remember, you look at the middle number, 16, and you take half of that, and that's what goes in these boxes. And half of 16x is 8x. Okay, so now, I know this is going to be x and x. Remember, that's always x and x when you complete the square, because x times x is x squared. And x times what equals 8x? 8. And then it's the same thing over here. X times 8, again, equals 8x. And now you fill in that last box. So now 8 times 8 is 64. And that's the number you're going to add to both sides. Here and here. Okay, so now, remember, you have to factor of this, but it's already factored here. 8x and 8 plus x and 8 plus x. And I have two of them, so we write 8 plus x plus 8 squared. Now -43 plus 64. Now let's pull out the calculator real quick. I'm going to add that up. -43 plus 64. Okay, well that's 21. And now, once I have parentheses, squared, and a number on the right, just like I said here, in our steps, let me see if I can pull it up. Just like I said here, I've got parentheses, squared, and the number on the right. Once I have that, then I can just square root both sides. Okay, so square root here, square root here. And now, remember the parentheses go away. And then I have, well, I can't do the square root of 21. So I'm just going to leave it in there until the last step. But remember, if I take a square root of a number, I still have to include plus minus. And then I'm going to subtract this 8 to get x alone. And then we're going to do minus 8. So now I'm going to have two answers again. The first answer will be positive 21 squared. I'm sorry, it's positive square root of 21. And then we'll subtract 8. And the second answer will be the negative square root of 21 minus 8. So now let's go to our calculator and figure out our first answer. So we're going to do square root of 21. Don't forget parentheses. Make sure you put parentheses after that. If you don't put parentheses after that 21, you're going to get a wrong answer. Okay? Then minus 1. Okay, so we get negative 3 point, let's round to the nearest thousandth, which is the third place. So 4.17, negative 3.417. And then, next answer will be, now we're going to do negative square root of 21. Don't forget your parentheses at the end, minus 8. Same thing, except now we have a negative in front of the square root. Now it's negative 12.58. Round to this number to the right is 5, so that'll make the 2 go up 1. So 583. So negative 12.583. Okay, there's your answer for that. All right. Okay, now number 9. Now number 9. Well, I see here that I've got x squared on the left, and I have a number on the right. Well, I remember that when I get something like this, x squared equals 36, again I can do square root of both sides. And that would give me x equals plus and minus 6 here, if this was like, if it was set up like this. And again, they would say two answers, so it would be positive 6 and negative 6. Well, in this case over here, like in my example, this x squared did not have a number next to it, but this does. So we should try to get rid of that 3. So to get rid of that, let's divide both sides by that same 3. That 3 goes away. Now, 75 divided by 3, if I did in my calculator, 75 divided by 3 is 25. Now, I can take the square root of both sides. And don't forget, if you square root a number, it's going to be plus and minus. So you're going to have plus and minus 5. But we write that out as two numbers, positive 5 and negative 5. Okay? And again, you could do this a different way. You could subtract 75 from this side, get two numbers in the middle, or get two numbers. And you couldn't do the shortcut because you can't take the square root of either of those. But unless you divide it by 3 first, then you could subtract 25 over here and do the shortcut. But then this takes a lot less time. Okay, so now this one, again, we want to try to factor. 68 on top, negative 4 on the bottom. To be honest, I'm not really even sure. And I could sit here for a while and try to figure this out. And for some of you, maybe you see those two numbers right away. But for some of us, we might not see it right away. So let's do something where we don't have to wait around for too long. Okay? Well, first of all, we could try and sit there and figure out what multiplies to 68. Okay, well, I know 2 times 34, 3 times, no, 3 doesn't work. 4 times, let's see. Then 4 times, I don't know, 15, 17. 5, no, 5 doesn't work. 6 doesn't work. And then 7, no, 7 doesn't work. So to be honest, I'm even kind of having trouble trying to figure out what those numbers could be. And after you work it out, there actually isn't really anything that actually works. Okay, so next step, let's try completing the square. Okay, so subtract 68 from this side, from both sides. Now we get x squared minus 4x equals, leave space, equals negative 68. Then we do our box. Now let's move all this out the way so that we have some room. Okay, so now, oops, sorry, x squared. And remember the middle number, which is negative 4x this time, not positive. So we're going to put negative 2x here and negative 2x here because we want half of that number. And remember, this is always x and x. And x times negative 2 and x times negative 2 equals those numbers. And negative 2 times negative 2 is positive 4. And remember that 4, you're going to add it to both sides, just like before. Okay, so now, factor to the left. Remember your factors are up here. X minus 2 squared equals negative 68 plus 4. Well, that's negative 64. Now all we do is take the square root of both sides. And some of you guys are like, wait a minute, there's a problem. There is a problem. Because when we take the square root of negative 64, well, we can't do that. We're not going to end up with a real solution if we have a negative number inside the square root. So you pretty much just want to stop there. Because now I know there's going to be no real solution. So if you end up with a negative number inside the square root, just know it's no real solution. And just stop there. You don't have to keep going. Okay? Once you have a negative under your square root after adding up whatever's in there, then you just stop there and tell me it's no real solution. Okay? But make sure you show your work. I want to see you make the steps, or take all the steps to get there. Okay, now this one. Again, we want to try to go for factoring. But in order to do that, we need the right side to equal 0. So that means I need to subtract both 4x here and subtract this 1. Okay, so again, we have to subtract it from both sides, so let's do it over here as well. So now it's 2x squared minus 4x and then minus 1 equals, well, these cross out, so just now it's 0. So let's try our x. First number times the last, 2 times negative 1, negative 2. Bottom number, negative 4. Only numbers that multiply to 2 are 2 and 1, and there's no way I can make 4. So that's not going to work. Okay? Okay, so let's try completing the square. Well, remember, in order to complete the square, this first number has to be 1, and it's not, it's 2. So if I divide by 2, well, that's a problem too, because this divides by 2, the 4 divides by 2, but the 1 does not. I end up with 1/2, and we don't want that either. So that's not going to work either. So now here is where I've tried the factoring, I've tried completing the square, and I have to use the quadratic formula now. So remember the steps. First, identify A, B, and C. What's A, what's B, what's C? Remember, our first number is A, 2. Second number is B, negative 4. And the third number, negative 1, is our C. Now, let's write out our formula and start plugging in our numbers. Okay, remember it's negative 1 times B, the middle number, plus and minus the square root of B squared, so negative 4 squared, minus 4 times A, which is 2, times C, which is negative 1, all over 2 times A, which is 2. Okay. So now negative 1 times negative 4 would be 4. This becomes positive. And then plus and minus square root. Now negative 4 squared, 16. And then negative 4 times 2 is negative 8. Then times negative 1 will be positive 8. And then all over 2 times 2, which is 4. So now add up the numbers inside the square root. And then 16 plus 8 is 24. And that's all over 4. And normally I would take the square root of 24 and then just separate them. But right now I can't take the square root of 24. Because remember, that's not a perfect square. So now I need to separate them. And the first answer is going to be 4 plus the square root of 24. And then we divide by 4. And the second answer will be 4 minus the square root of 24 divided by 4. So now, I'll do that all on the calculator. Okay, so first, let's do 4 plus square root of 24, parentheses, and then divide that by 4. And I get 2.22, and we'll round to the thousandth. So look at the 7. 7 will make that 4 go up 1. So 2.225. 2.225. And the second one, I'm going to subtract that square root of 24 this time. Okay, same thing. 4 minus the square root of 24. And then don't forget, divide that by 4. And now I get negative 0.2247. And again, that 7 is going to make that 4 go up. So negative 0.225. Okay? And that was us using the quadratic formula. Okay? So again, make sure you finish all those problems in the Edpuzzle. And when you are done with all that, come and see me on a Monday or Tuesday, and we'll review for the test, and then you'll be ready to go. Hopefully we can get you a grade up. Okay? All right. Let's do it. Be brave.